Hello? Oh, okay. I'm trying to figure out if I need to unmute my, I think that's working now. I had to unmute my thing.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So we're gonna get started. I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker on, she's gonna give you the bulk of our background on water law. So this is Whitney Coulter. She's with Fisher, Brown, Bartlett, Larson, and Ermey, and she joined in the fall of 2018 after a year-long clerkship with Chief Judge Harmon in Water Division 1. She obtained her bachelor's and master's degrees in journalism. I didn't know that. And her first job at a newspaper, the Greeley Tribune, brought her to Colorado in 2012. She earned her Juris Doctorate degree in 2017 at University of Denver's Stern College of Law. And her interest in water law stems from growing up on her family farm in southeastern Idaho. Since joining the firm, Ms. Coulter has worked on a variety of water-related and property-related matters, including transfers of water rights applications, and civil litigation related to irrigation. So she knows all the things and she can answer all your questions.
That's the promise, right? What happens if I don't follow through on that?
I think we have to click. Our clicker is lacking.
It might be nice too for me to be able to go back and forth. Yeah, okay. Okay, hi everyone. I want to note something. I think you may have either Dan Brown or Brent Bartlett on your, or at least thought you might hear from them. The reason Dan isn't here today is he's in litigation in a water rights case. So he's doing a deposition of it's a bunch of different parties, experts, and then one of our ditch company representatives. And so water law, we don't see a lot of litigation actually in terms of like depositions and dramatic court appearances. But sometimes we ramp up and here he is in a deposition. So it's not always a friendly area of law. So I also want to get an understanding of who we have here, and I'm not quite sure about the best way to do that, but what I'm wondering is how many of you are affiliated with municipality, water service provider, county, something like that, like a governmental entity. Okay, so you all know the struggle of obtaining a water supply that's reliable, and you probably are familiar with trying to find those water rights, trying to purchase them, and then what to do with them once you have them. Okay, and we're all in Northern Colorado, right? In terms of governmental entities. Okay. I guess I'm just guessing on other types of people who are interested in water, or in water, generally speaking. Anybody here with like an ag-related entity? Okay. What's your? Oh, yes, I feel like. Oh, just don't tell your attorneys what I told you. Brad. I don't know things. Okay, well, so with the caveat that you talked to him about anything. And where are you?
We're with the city of Loveland, but we hold license and
Cool.
type stuff. So kind of an all of being government.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of this whole discussion is these water rights, for the most part, we'll talk about it, but these water rights were really grown and perfected in agriculture, right? And so by the time you get them, you're still very much tied to those agricultural users. Okay, very cool. And then, so what am I missing then? We've got municipal or governmental water service providers and then agricultural. So if you didn't raise your hand before, would you mind just telling me who you're with?
Yeah, consulting. So we work planning and engagement work for communities as well as some private organizations.
Okay, and so water is a big part, obviously, then of your community planning. Okay, very cool. Okay.
So I'm a realtor and a former ditch writer.
Oh my gosh, really? Who did you work for?
For the Woods Lake system, and then also the rural Nevada, which is off of the East Ditch.
That's how cool. Well, then you should talk all about how dishes work. Sounds way more fun. Okay, very cool. And then obviously transactions, real estate transactions with water are very complex. And I oftentimes I see them after they've gone through and something didn't get transferred right anyway. So that's a great perspective to have. And where are you from?
I work for the Coalition for the Pure Watershed. So we are very much involved in like collaborative conversations around managing all of our water resources with, the environment in mind, but also people.
Absolutely. So you're familiar with the Pooter Flows, Pooter Runs Through It initiative, Pooter Flows program, all that. Okay. So our firm is working on that.
With the
On water.
Yes,
The water card application is actually on the,
Yeah.
the legal side of it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Who else did I miss? Okay. Black Bass.
One thing in Colorado.
Okay, so you're very familiar with the nuances that go along with, well, in particular, having water rights as collateral, that's a call we get often. That's really complex, but yeah, those transactions involving water rights, how does that measure up in terms of the rest of the real estate that we know how to work with? Okay, very cool. Okay, and then.
We're fortunate to have lots of water.
Amazing, yeah, I mean, that's gonna be, so I'll talk about the history here, but from my perspective, that's where we are now, is how do we've pretty much got the water we're gonna have, right? So now we have to make sure that we're maximizing its beneficial use for all different types of water uses that we all care about. Back in the 1850s, Colorado was a lot different, and the interests were very different, but we're all here now, and we care about a lot of different things, so. Very cool. Oh, did you bring samples? Has anyone asked you that yet? Okay, yeah.
My name is Tim Coons. I'm with the Wild Community Foundation. We're the governors to create charitable funds,
Okay, very cool. Do you know Lisa Larson at all? She does a lot of trust and estate work, so I know she works pretty over here in Literate County, at least on those types of transactions when people have water rights. What can we do with those to put them to a charitable use? So, pretty cool. Okay.
I'm in environmental consulting and making sure that groundwater and surface water is
So you work for an independent consulting firm, or you working for any specific entity?
We get contracted through vendors or oil and gas companies to, pay messes and issues to land, make sure landowners and agricultural folks are taken care of and want to be productive moving forward.
Absolutely, cool. Good to know you're there then, because those are the concerns that I have when I'm working on behalf of ditch companies, where oil and gas companies are crossing them. I'm like, okay, but what happens if something really goes wrong? But anyway, very cool. Okay. Okay, so I think, and I'm sorry if I'm, anybody else that I missed? Not in one of those categories. I'm really high level categorizing, so sorry. But I think with that in mind, please ask me questions that are, buzzing in your minds as I'm going along. I really don't want to just talk at you about water law. But I do, if it's helpful, assuming it's helpful, just want to set the stage for Colorado water rights. I'll be here for 3 hours, but I am sure you all, actually I don't know if all of you are familiar with how unique Colorado is. And you might be, because anytime you get on a plane and say like anything about Colorado water, like when I'm on a plane and I'm talking about I'm a water rights attorney, anybody from, not from Colorado, and even some people from Colorado were like, so what do you do? What does that mean? And not to brag, but I think we have one of the most innovative and really impressive, all-encompassing water use, water rights systems anywhere. Certainly the most unique in the country. We're the only state in the well, I guess I don't know about other countries, but we're the only state in the US that has water courts, for instance. So how that works is the judge who sits in any particular judicial district, one of those judges is assigned to be the water judge. And in Water Division 1, which is in Greeley, that's like a full-time docket for the most part. Water Division 1, where we all are, is the busiest in the state. We get the most applications, we process the most applications, and I think we probably fight the most too. Though some other divisions might argue about that. But so it's also interesting because, you think about our neighbors to the north here. I did not point in the right direction, I don't think, but Wyoming, for instance, or where I grew up in Idaho. Thank you. I'm just gonna say the random. You guys know where I'm talking about. Or where I grew up in Idaho, they have water rights, and so my family has water rights growing up on my farm in Idaho. But they were managed very differently. And what was interesting in Idaho is we got to go to the state engineer and tell them what we thought our water rights were. It was an administrative process, no water court. The only time we were, if we fought about that, then I guess lawyers did get involved in terms of who really is entitled to what amount of water right. But my dad had to go to the state engineer and say, here's my history of my family, here's my water right, here's what I did work. And they put it all in this basically big long list of water rights in Idaho. But that's called something called a general adjudication. And they did that over the course of, I don't know how long it took, but a really long time to get all of those. But essentially, effectively, it was people coming in and telling them what they thought their water rights were. Here in Colorado, it's an adjudicative process, meaning if you want a water right, you've got to go to water court. And depending on how complex your water right is or what you're asking the court to decree for you, that's a really intimidating and expensive process, as many of you probably know. So our system is very unique, and so I guess I'll just kind of get into the history here a little bit, and you guys get bored, yawn, and I'll know you're bored. We can talk about something else. But one of the reasons that our system here is so unique is that when our predecessors first got here in Colorado, they noticed there was a problem. We didn't have enough water to do things that all these other settlements, particularly back east, were used to doing, irrigating for agriculture. And that was the way of life. So, we got to this really dry place. I still think this is sort of funny because I think you guys all are very aware of this, but we seem to have reached the agony of barrenness and desolation. Wood and water fail, and we are in a desert indeed. So sounds like a great place to set up shop. And so I just think, looking back, obviously this is a beautiful area. But what was the plan, guys? So really the remedy to that was, well, the water's not exactly where we need it. Let's move it. We'll move it around. So we're going to dig some ditches, and we're going to move the water from the main naturally occurring streams to where we need it for our farm. And really be creative with gravity flow and all that back then. Really impressive engineering on behalf of those farmers. In order to even survive here, you're going to have to move the water around. So let's just go to this. So this is kind of the layout, I think. Again, probably a gross oversimplification of the history of water law. But it really explains why, for instance, when you go to, you're trying to purchase a share in a ditch company, and the ultimate point is to change that for whatever uses you're looking to put it to. This kind of explains why those are so expensive, and why they're so, why we have really some conflict when we're trying to change those water rights from what was historically an agricultural use to drinking water, or for breweries. So the thing to keep in mind is that the rest of the nation follows what you may be very familiar with this. I'm sorry to repeat it, but riparian law, which effectively means if you only have a water right if water naturally flows through your property. And so back east, I think, again, if you know people back east and start talking to them about it, they have too much water for the most part. And so their issue is how do we get this away from our property? But also, you know, as a landowner, you have the right to use a portion of that water. You still have to put it to a beneficial use. So there are still rules in riparian law. You can't just do whatever you want with the water. But that's what your right is tied to, is your ownership of the property on which the water naturally flows. Here, so that just wasn't going to work because not enough property here had naturally flowing streams. And so we had to come up with a way, and I say we, very smart people long before me, had to come up with a way to allow people to divert water from those main streams, natural streams, and do it in a fair way, right? And then also make sure that the water wasn't just going to go to waste for whatever someone wanted to use it. And just for fun fact, California follows basically a mixture of prior appropriation, which is what we have here in Colorado, and riparian law. So I wouldn't even begin to understand that, but they're a hybrid system there. If you have friends there, you can impress them with your knowledge. So it's a very interesting topic of conversation. So our system really, and we began with mining in Colorado, right? We had the miners, they needed water for to be able to operate their mines. And so those are really the earliest ones that came online. And again, the water wasn't where they needed it to be, so they dug ditches to bring it to where they needed to use it. And so also agricultural irrigation was in need of the same type of system. And so really they followed kind of the same rules in terms of, so now that we have people who are taking water from these streams that naturally exist, how do we decide who gets what and when they get to use it and who has the better right? So that's why we came up with a priority system. They came up with a priority system. And so we have the priority system here in Colorado and also the prior appropriation doctrine, which just seems like a lot of fancy legal work for saying, I got here first, and I get the water first. I get my water first, right? So you know, where we are today in northern Colorado, the earliest rights, the lowest priority, right? So the best rights. First priorities, that's how I should say that. First priorities, the best water rights are mostly in agricultural irrigation. And for the most part, they're in ditch company systems because back then, if you're an individual landowner, farmer, you probably don't have the resources or let alone the time to go and dig your very own ditch to get your water from, you know, the natural stream to where you need it. So farmers came together and figured out, hey, generally speaking, let's just get this water, you know, to all of our farms. And then those eventually formed into what we now see as mutual ditch companies. And I'll talk about this a little bit more if we get to talking about what, you know, change cases and challenges. But as you might imagine, the way that farmers use the water under those ditch systems and the way that municipalities need water, for example, are very different. So now we're going to try to take how these water rights were historically used as just when the farmer was telling the ditch rider, hey, I'm ready for my share, my crops are ready, I need this much for this many days or whatever. We're going from that to, we have people turning on their showers and faucets every day apparently, so we're going to need water year round. So it's a really big challenge, and you know, we're still facing a lot of challenges in figuring out how to do that fairly and without messing up the whole system, which in legal speak is causing injury to the water rights. So just to kind of give you a hierarchy, I guess, of the water rights. So we've got the ditches, the just direct flow, pulling water straight from the natural stream and putting it directly to irrigation use. But as you might imagine, that's not going to work for everyone. So oftentimes the flow in the ditch was too much for farmers at any given time. Or, you know, obviously they needed not take water for some period of time while their crops are getting up, and then, harvesting as well, and you need the farmers need to be able to make that decision. So they had a timing issue effectively, is, okay, the water's ready, here you go. So the next thing that we had to do, they had to do was, figure out how to store this water. And so water storage rights were the next ones that really came online in terms of their priorities. And that allowed these ditch companies and on behalf of their farmers to retime the water that was available to them. It's coming down in the spring melts. It's not, and we need to make it last all the way through, with the lovely weather we're having, all the way through December, I don't know, but usually October, right? So the reservoirs that many of these mutual ditch companies have, not many of them, some of them are lucky enough to have a system where you have both direct flow rights and reservoirs, so you can really time that. Not every system has that, so those are still pretty challenging. But that allowed for the ability to kind of stretch out the use of the water, and then they weren't just kind of wasting water also, just like letting it go by. Okay, so now we have a pretty good system effectively in terms of, okay, we can divert water from the natural stream, and we can store it, retime it for when we might need it. And just so you know, the reservoirs typically fill outside of the irrigation season, so they're ready to go in terms of the priorities. So they fill outside of the irrigation season. So one of our clients is going to start filling probably November 1st and really try to build up as much water as they can at that point. And then obviously, so depending on how they work, we'll also maybe filling during the spring runoff. Okay, so we have a pretty good infrastructure system here, but that still wasn't enough water, practically speaking, for everything, for everyone here. And so there was some really creative problem solvers who came up with this idea of diverting water from other natural streams. So it's like a grander scale of a ditch, right, I guess. But those are called trans-mountain or trans-basin diversions. I wonder what slides I have here. Oh, that's funny. These are all way better. Well, anyway. So I want to go back. Sorry, I guess I should have been flipping through these. I thought that was my only good slide. But so the way that we have water rights here in Colorado is, again, may just be something you already understand. But a water right is the right to use water. It's not the right to divert it and do whatever you want with it or waste it, particularly. Your water right is really just the right to use it. And that's a really hard thing to talk about with people. So in one instance, when it's a landowner who has a stream running through their property, for instance, they really have a hard time of understanding why they can't use some of that water or divert it to a cute pond, like a pond or something like that. And I had to explain that you would have to have a water right to do that because you're changing the way the natural stream functions, and there's going to be some losses that other water rights are entitled to. And then why can't I use as much water as I want? I mean, the whole point is using this resource for beneficial uses. And in Colorado, there are a number of beneficial uses, municipal uses, including supporting their residents in all of their water needs. So those are pretty broad, but obviously agricultural, mining, again, sort of a strange one, but nowadays anyway. And then we have environmental uses that are beneficial as well. Just the sheer idea of keeping the river systems healthy is considered beneficial use. Those are done in very specific ways, and only certain governmental entities can hold those types of water rights to protect the system. But again, that's one of the benefits. Hold those types. But again, that's one of the benefits.
Information about this,
Information management process.
talks about
funding
funding fixed amounts
of
water
first.
Well, I know. So where does that come from? Sorry, I'm not familiar with it, but I can talk about it. Okay. Yeah. So let's go to I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. This is fun. Okay, so groundwater rights came online even after some talk about these transbasin diversions coming from where these really big systems are getting water from other systems and bringing it to be able to use here in northern Colorado. That water is a little bit more magical because it's more flexible in terms of how you can use it. And so that increased the supply that we have available to us. But the next thing that we wanted to start talking about is groundwater. And we can talk about the CBP project as well, if you guys want to in a second, but I kind of want to address this groundwater question. Groundwater in Colorado is very complex because you have just your basic like irrigation wells. Farmers went out, dug some wells, got some water. Great, wonderful. Those are most typically just alluvial wells, so they're not super deep. They're mostly reliant and connected, very connected to the natural streams. So you'll hear about those kinds of wells. And then there are designated basin groundwater rights or groundwater systems. And again, very smart people came up with where those aquifers are and how we might be able to use the water in them to some extent without completely just running them dry. So what you're talking about, I think, is the concept that those aquifer groundwater resources are extremely limited. And obviously they're not being replenished very quickly, if at all. A lot of them are sort of sealed off in their little bubble underground. Probably not the right word for it, but they're not. But so the idea is if, you know, a municipality or an entity does have these groundwater rights in an aquifer, those are going to be used very slowly and to the minimum amount possible. So that, I mean, I think sip slowly, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that has something to do with, you know, you stick a straw in a fishbowl.
It's like if the water is there to last 100 years, you have to take out 1% per year. And then just slowly, but then I think something in the down south, like all those things were saying, well, it may refill on its own more quickly, and therefore that's our water. Therefore, we should be able to use more of it rather than just 1%. I know really that they sided with the state. They're like, yeah, you can't do that because really owns the Cherry Ranch aquifer. And so they're concerned that people doing wells may arbitrarily pull water from that aquifer into their wells, and that's used water. So it was very interesting because I was reading about it this morning, or if you had information on that.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that too is, so groundwater wells are still considered part of the priority system, generally speaking, these alluvial wells that are out, you know, you see them connected to pivots all over the place here. Those are considered part of the priority system, and so they have very low priorities. So most of the time they're not allowed to pump unless they have what's called an augmentation plan, which is, I will try to get there, guys, but that is, I'm still working to understand that after like 7 years. But with like the Greeley's Cherry Ranch rights, those are in an aquifer. There's a set amount of water that's there. Yes, it may be replenished, but the presumption, the legal presumption, is that water is not coming back, so you have to sip it slowly. So your water right so when you go to water, it's not even water court, it's a groundwater commission. Sometimes it's water court. But you go and get a water right that says, okay, we're going to quantify the amount of water that would be available overall in this aquifer based on your overlying land ownership, which is another fun nuance there. Now we're kind of back in riparian territory, right? But the important thing about these aquifer rights is those are outside the priority system. You don't have to, it's not first in time, first in right. It's based on land ownership. But it's just bad policy to allow an increase in diversions of that water and some sort of assumption that water is going to naturally replenish, because it may. But so the presumption is, we're just going to say you got enough water to last you 100 years, which in the grand scheme of things is not that long. But we're going to allow you to take a little bit, you know, over that course of time so you don't deplete it. but really the presumption is you're gonna run out in a few years. So it's definitely a good water right type to have in a portfolio, and I'm seeing a lot of municipal entities, working on those types of, water sources. But it really is a part of a portfolio in that it's not your answer, right, forever.
Can I just add to it?
Yeah.
I think some of those like pumping rates, they're actually based on the amount of time that it takes water to refill some of those aquifers, not all of them, but.
Okay, yeah.
And so like, if you're pumping at the rate that is prescribed, hypothetically, it should be refilling. In 100 years, you should still have
Okay, so you're saying, yeah.
some water in there if you're not pumping over that.
Over.
But it's pretty simplified, and I think, yeah, some folks are finding that might not be the case, that assumption.
Right, and so I do mostly surface water rights, and then alluvial groundwater, like tributary groundwater rights. So when we get into the non-tributary groundwater area, I'm definitely not a scientist, and it's really hard to understand. But the limitation on that is intended to prevent completely drying out. Okay, that makes more sense. But the other thing that a lot of entities are doing, and one of our clients is doing it actually, is working on aquifer recharge. So these aquifers are down there, they naturally hold water. Why couldn't we sort of use them as a storage facility, right? Depending on their location, how deep they are, drilling wells to a certain extent becomes cost prohibitive once you're getting to a certain level. But the location of these aquifers and then the ability to hold water, obviously, again, no scientists here, but I imagine there's some stuff under there that we probably don't want in our water as well. So there's gotta be some kind of treatment process. When it comes back, or maybe you treat it before you go back in, which again is something that I think we treat it before you go.
Storage, like 2 years, they'll pump water into the aquifer.
And they
Treat it before it goes in, and
then
then
there is a little bit of minuscule amounts of uranium in there, so we're building a treatment plant at Terry Ranch. That will treat that water and the uranium out of the water, and then pipe it into.
We're gonna have a whole presentation on Perry Range next session.
We better stop talking about it.
Whitney, I have a question. I've never heard of somebody saying they own an aquifer. How did that happen? Is it just based on land use or?
Ownership over lying. So you have your water rights are based on the number of acres. Just ties strictly to the number of acres that you own above that aquifer.
And this is not for alluvial aquifers. So alluvial aquifers are tied to a stream system. This is for confined. Jennifer, okay, this is for confined aquifer only. So when it's confined, it's within a very specific geographic area.
Gas or oil or something?
It's not tied hydrologically to anything else. And so that system is based on land ownership over that piece of aquifer. But if it's alluvial, then it is part of the prior appropriation system because it's tied to your surface water rights. Very complicated, yes.
So I'm thinking, I lived in a house on Windsor, and put that out of well, which was a new experience to me. And then my parents have a house that we rent out their lakes, and they think wells, they're primary water source. So I'm assuming those are things that are tapping into aquifers, or else properties have to have water rights.
So, oh boy, this is fun. So it's there's a, so when you talk about groundwater, there's, I don't know, 7 different kinds that we're talking about. We talk about wells, and we talk about how, okay, so also I think I know your husband. Is there?
He said you're a nice person.
That's right. So if nothing else, remember that I'm trying here. Okay, so again, wells are tributary wells, presumptively going to impact the stream itself. So you have to have a priority in order to be able to use them. And for the most part, because of the way that our system was constructed, ditches, reservoirs,
transbasin diversions and then wells. Transbasin. But anyway, that's the
kind of hierarchy.
Those wells
Those wells are never gonna operate really in the priority system. So what has to happen is one of two things.
one of
One of probably seven things, but I'll talk about here. So you buy a piece of property and you have a well permit. So this is where Colorado is really just administrative. So you go to the state engineer, and the state engineer gave you a well permit to use for most likely, so if you're on 35 acres or more, you can use it for indoor household uses. Washing your car outside, irrigation of up to an acre. You can water your own livestock, though you get to a certain number of livestock and it doesn't count anymore. But those types of wells are domestic, we call them domestic uses mostly because that's really what you would do on a farm, right? That's the water that you're using on a 35 acre parcel. Those are actually by statute exempted from the priority system, so they're called exempt wells. But you can only divert from that well up to 1 acre foot per year. And I know that doesn't really mean much either, but
you're also limited in how
you're also limited in how
your well pump can't be
your well pump can't be any faster than 15 gallons per minute.
And that also, those types of wells are
great.
Again, if you have a 35 acre parcel. So if you have 35 acres and you meet certain criteria, you may also be able to get an indoor use only well. And the reason for that is that water has a different depletion rate really on the system, just your indoor uses only, than like irrigating a garden that's an acre, big garden. You lose water in addition to what you're putting on your crops outside, you lose it to the ground, you lose it to evaporation. So these household use wells or domestic wells are considered, is that essentially the legislature found that those have such a small impact on the priority system, that it's fine to kind of continue to use those in that way. And I think that's pretty similar actually when you think about aquifer rules, right? If you use it in such a small way, you're not going to just totally drain it. Good. Now I'm back. She's helping me understand it.
So you don't need water rights because of the minimal impact of other people's water rights from these wells.
Right. And it's those very specific circumstances that you can get one of those exempt wells. There are also like specific commercial uses that you can get an exempt well for, but again, it depends on your acreage, so not everyone's gonna have 35 acres. So then the other likelihood, and I think if your parents are up in Red Feather, it's possible that they have a well that's in an augmentation plan. So your other option is if your well is not exempt, you're going to have it in an augmentation plan. What's interesting is if you come, should I try to explain what an augmentation plan is? Does anybody, do you guys? Okay, here we go. So, your well water rights have a really low priority, and so in the grand scheme of things, they would never be able to pump within the priority system legally. And the complicating factor here too is that as a well, when you're using a well, you're drawing water from the groundwater table, and so your depletions are going to impact the river later. So if you weren't drawing this water out of your well, it would have eventually made it back to the river, and some senior ditch company would have picked it up, or Greeley would have picked it up, or Fort Collins would have picked it up. But because you're diverting it now, that water doesn't make it there in however many years, right? So we're down to decimals in terms of how we calculate how that water traveled. These are all assumptions, right? So in order to be able, so not only are you impacting the system, but you're leaving a hole in the river like months, weeks, probably years down the road. So then our system's all out of whack. So what you have to do is replace the water that you're pumping out of the ground at the river. There are some other ways to do it. They're a little bit more complicated. It's called something called a recharge right. So I'm pumping my well, but I have this pit right here that's really close in proximity, and I can put ditch water rights maybe into that pit, and it'll kind of even out the water I'm drawing and the water that's going back into the aquifer, and maybe that's going to be fine. Again, something engineers figure out. But for the most part, it's going to be an augmentation plan. So the interesting thing is, well, okay, I want to pump this well. What water do I use to replace it then if I'm relying on this well? So how do we do that? And so usually it's by using one of these senior ditch water rights. changing it for augmentation purposes, and then making those replacements, under the augmentation plan. And so they're kind of the sip slowly idea, I guess. They're very small amounts that you're replacing over the course of, each month, each year. And then you have year-round depletions, again, because when you're irrigating with dishwater, you're just during irrigation season. But when you're pumping a well, again, depletions are made for December, January, one every year. But so you're having to make those replacements at the river year round. So an augmentation plan is really just a way of making up for the fact that you're diverting out of priority and you didn't have a right to divert that water at the time. So you're helping balance things back out and making sure that there's no water missing at the river when somebody goes to pick it up who has the right to do so. And so, okay, so what water rights do we use? Like I said, it's mostly dish company water rights that are changed for these purposes. And so you have to be able to find a ditch water right that's going to work for that purpose, be in the right general area too. But so they're highly complex cases. So when you say I'm an individual landowner, I need a well. Can I just have an application? Can I just go get an application for a water pump? And I usually tell people, an individual landowner, it's going to be cost prohibitive. Because not only are you going through water port, attorney fees, and paying your attorneys to fight with everyone, you also have engineers who are going to be doing these calculations on whether or not your well depletions are going to cause injuries to senior water rights or adjudicate water rights. So, it's most likely that your parents are in an already established augmentation plan. So some communities, Greeley has an augmentation plan at least, if not multiple, right? I'm sure they do, they have to.
And we just banned the wells.
And you just banned wells.
We've got all
There you go, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Especially right after our class, I was like, oh, I know some of this stuff now.
Right, so it's like, it's a really big undertaking. One of our clients, the Cashview Water Users Association, way back in the day, was able to put together an augmentation plan. And it basically took, it used the fact that its members, as the water users of the Cashview Basin, had all these water rights. So it basically uses all the water rights of its members to replace the depletions from wells. But as you might imagine, as far down the time frame as we are, that plan isn't accepting new wells, right? So, your parents are probably in an augmentation plan. I think I'm pretty familiar with Red Letter Lakes, and so I think that community association actually has its own augmentation plan.
So they own water rights that they don't utilize elsewhere to offset whatever they're taking out.
Yeah, and I can't remember what their augmentation source is, and up there I think it's actually a pretty big issue, but right, so they have other water rights that they use to replace and kind of just play a game of cups, I guess, with water.
Sometimes it has to do with the timing of things. So they'll pump water out during the irrigation season. And I'm not talking about your parents, but they'll pump water out during the irrigation season. That is out of priority. But then they'll replace that water during the winter when no one else is using the water and they're able to get their water. Right, and they'll put it back in the system so that they can pump out of priority in a time when everyone else, the senior guys have the calls on the river and they're using all that water, right?
It just seems so much more straightforward and the water's in a stream or in a ditch that you're just pouring more in than this seems like this is more indirect.
It is. And it's an engineering thing, so that's another thing that as a water attorney, I am best friends with a bunch of water engineers, because I couldn't understand most of this and clearly don't without them. And so they're doing those calculations on, okay, you're this far from the river, the aquifer looks like this under there, got this type of soil, how fast was that water gonna make it back to the river, and they do that calculation. And then they split it all up and say, well, okay, in order to avoid injury, you need to do this. And then the engineers fight over who's right about these depletions, and they fight about, oh, well, you forgot to factor in this issue, and it's going to stop the water from getting there. So anyway, It's very complicated, and in my mind, it's all just magic under there. I have no idea how it works.
So it doesn't matter if finding somebody who has water for sale, going and purchasing half an acre foot, or whatever you're gonna use per year, and then at some point, it's upstream or downstream, making sure that amount of water gets back from the river.
I think generally speaking, yeah, but you have to make sure that that's all part of your augmentation plan, that all fits in, so there you're back in water court most of the time. So, yeah.
Just wondering, are there regulations related to like distance? There's kind of like, does the water have to be within like a certain proximity or does enter the stream?
Okay, so that's a good question. So if you think of the river as let's go back to this
It's all
one.
part of the
This is fine.
calculations that are done, has to do with the distance and the soil and the time and the infiltration and.
You put up the river a mile through, or it could be 30.
Like maybe 30 miles.
Well, so what matters is where your depletions hit the river. So let's say, well, this is probably not going to be close, but it's a picture. So let's say your well's right here, and for some reason your depletions hit the river right here. Okay. So the next one down here, the next senior priority or next water right down here is going to be the first one to see that water's missing. And so your replacement of that water needs to be in time, place, and amount enough, close enough that this senior water right owner or this water right owner isn't going to see that water missing. So the replacement is time, place, and amount, right? And yes, there's a little bit of flexibility, but there's no like 30-mile limit or like anything like that. It really just depends on where you are on the river, where your depletions hit, and who else is around you. Because sometimes you can get away with making depletions just down to the next calling senior when they might be 30 miles down. I don't know. I can't think of a specific example of that, but in concept, but really your obligation is to make sure basically that no water right, the river doesn't see your depletion.
We take anywhere like prior to that next water right owner's diversion, you can augment it, but not like by the time it gets to the next person down, the water's not back.
Right, so say you had your wells here, your depletions are here, and you had, for some reason you were able to put dishwater in right here. That's probably gonna be okay, you might be on the for some losses here that occurred, I just don't know how long, I'm not to scale on this. But, you're gonna be, so there's gonna be a bunch of different factors, but most of the time these augmentation plans work in a way that the science says, as long as you replace it here, these water right owners aren't gonna feel that. There's some flexibility, but it's all very complicated. Yes.
Who indicates the augmentation plans for the wells? Is that just engineers?
So that's back in water court.
Oh,
So you have to have, are you guys all familiar with the big well shutdown in Weld County, I can't remember the name of it. Probably it's in that area, gas, thank you, right, okay, so gas. Actually, what was happening with, a lot of these irrigation wells, and they were really old irrigation wells, they've been functioning for a really long time. But what was happening is the division engineer was effectively allowing people to pump their wells, replace water. So it was the plan to replace it, right? They had, just make sure this ditch is on here, you have rights in this ditch, that's fine, that replaces it. So they were really kind of administratively operating an augmentation plan. The Colorado Supreme Court ultimately said, obviously people weren't happy about this. So the Colorado Supreme Court ultimately said, no, you need to have a water court decreed augmentation plan to ensure that this water is being replaced in time, place, and amount, and preventing injury to other water rights. And so, to answer your question, it has been the division engineer in some circumstances, but that's not okay anymore. So the law says you have to go to water court, have a water court approve your augmentation plan, again, all these different facets of it to make sure that your pumping is not going to cause injury. And oftentimes, like I was saying, these augmentation plans occur on a much larger scale. So we have municipal clients that have large scale well fields. So they pump that water, but they also have on a large scale to replace that water at the river. So they have these big portfolios of water rights, and exchanges even where we have this water here, so we take it out here and then we put it back here and it all works out. So I would never envy a water commissioner to have a water commissioner coming in. Last time. So, is it Mark?
I don't know, it's changed a few times. It's David Rich.
They're so busy, honestly, I get it, for sure. But anyway, to have a job of a water commissioner to actually administer that and make sure, now that we have the decree, we have to make sure that that's actually occurring on the river. Oh, boy, it's a lot of work, yeah.
Right, now it's here, but does augmentation always perfectly equate to usage? My guess is, you know, following a drop of water from a headwater to its final destination, does that diminish in any capacity?
That's cool, yeah, engineering question, but I'm gonna try. So, I don't, so I think it is the amount space, so you're pumping your well here, the dilution occurring here, so how much water do you really need to put in the river? I think it's the same, depending on if there, I mean, there might be losses in the ground. There's no evaporation of it.
Use.
Well, I'm just assuming that at some point, all the water gets used.
So water rights are based on consumptive use only. So that is the amount that essentially like the plant takes up or, you know, it's not returning to the system. It's evaporating up in the sky, it might go off to Nebraska.
You did talk about that the first time.
And so like if you think about, you're pumping water out of the ground, you're applying it on your field. Some of that water is going back into the ground that's not being used by the plant or evaporating. And your water rights are only gonna be based on the consumptive use that's not returning to the system. So if you think about an augmentation plan, I believe, and Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're responsible to replace that consumptive use only. Is that true?
You have to replace back to the rivers, so the rivers have damage. It has to be the same.
Of the consumptive use?
But you go before it's consumptive use that the judge looks at. But then we have this other interesting interplay, and that is return flows.
Right.
You know, you talked about the drop of water. Here we're in the South Flat, we figure one drop of water is used to reuse about 7 times. It's wasted to the rest.
And maybe it would be helpful, so am I done at 11:15?
Yeah.
Is that the plan? So I guess we can do one of two things. You guys can ask me any other questions you have, and we can kind of just chat it out the rest of the way. Or I can just keep going and talk about change cases to get how we take water from these ditch rights and that one? That one. Great. Oh, good, that requires me to talk alone. Okay. This is crash course in augmentation plans. I mean, sorry, change cases. That's what we're gonna do. This is pretty much it. Okay. So we're gonna try to take this, so this water right was perfected by a farmer. And he or she pulled it from, called for it through the ditch company, received it on their property, used it, and as they were just saying, some of that water is what that they put on the crops, just went right back down into the ground, back to the river, no trouble. And then some of it was actually consumptively used though, because the plants drank it and didn't go back anywhere that we're ever gonna see it together, actually. So it's out of the system. So you have that consumptive use piece is really what the municipality ends up in terms of their water right, that they can drink, do what would, well, put it to beneficial use, but that's their amount. But then there's this, that's the return flow part of it is, so there's the consumptive use that you're entitled to use as a municipality to change the water right, but you also still have to make sure that that water that was seeping into the ground and still making it back to the river still does that. So that's not necessarily augmentation, that's replacement of return flows. And so when, let's see, so we're trying to calculate, I mean, really, it's like trying to use, I don't know what a good example is, but these ditch water rights operate in a very specific way, and now what's gonna happen is they're no longer gonna be used on farms, obviously that water right isn't gonna be used for irrigation. It probably is, like, a portion of it still has to run through the ditch to make sure that the other people who still farm under that ditch don't have to pay more in ditch loss, because ditches naturally are gonna lose some water, even if they're lined concrete ditches, which are not common yet. So they're not losing water to the ground as they're flowing. There's gonna be evaporation and other losses because they're ditches. So you have to make, so when you take a water, say you're changing a water right, you're gonna use it to drink in your city. You have to account for ditch loss to make sure the company's still okay with that. Oftentimes, you're still required to have that water be diverted through the ditch system, again, for this very purpose, and then you get to use that consumptive use portion by returning it to the river and picking it up somewhere else, or using it for augmentation purposes. But there's a whole bunch of science and a bunch of assumptions that are being made in terms of what that farmer actually used in terms of consumptive use, and then what made it back to the river. And so that really is what a water court case is determining, is what amount of water can this municipality, and I use that as the most general example, but all sorts of types of entities change water rights. But this municipality, how much can they use consumptively, good to go, they can drink it, and how much do they have to replace to the river, and how are they gonna do that? Again, same with augmentation plan, though, you're replacing it at the same time, place, and amount. So you have to have other sources somewhere to be able to make sure that those return flow replacements are also being made. If you have Trans Mountain water, like CBT, I call it magic water because you don't have to make those return flow replacements. Because it came from another system, we're already baking in what we can bring over. So that water can be fully consumed without having a return flow obligation. Okay, help me out, Jennifer.
In CBT, the government requires return flows to stay in the basin and not to be reused. So when you get a portion of CBT, you get one use.
Right, okay,
And it goes back into return.
okay, got it.
Just to clarify, is that a replacement in the Thompson water tank or back or irrigation plant?
In the plant,
In the plant.
within the plant.
Okay.
So single use CBT water, and obviously CBT water is only for specific
Yes,
purposes,
that's
right?
right.
So
So
you
you
can,
probably have somebody come talk to you.
I hope so, Northern Water, someone get in here.
We're at Northern Water all next month.
Oh, wonderful, okay. Say hi to Eric Brown for you. Okay, well, that was probably, I don't know if that helps you understand what we're trying to do with water forward. But so right now, the deposition that Dan is at is our client is the ditch company. A municipality is trying to change that water right. And we as the ditch company are trying to make sure that the ditch company can continue to function as it has historically, while they're still allowed to get the water that they're entitled to. So it's a really hard, challenge to try to allow these, it's like, old meets new. Like you're trying to have it both ways, right? We're still back in the agricultural days where we need this water for agriculture in this ditch. And now we're putting it to all these other uses in this municipalities trying to do that. So how do we reconcile those very different kinds of uses without causing injury to other water rights and without completely messing up the farmers on the ditch? So that's really what we're talking about, I shouldn't say fighting about, talking about when we have all of our experts get together and say, well, I think this is a problem. Well, I don't think it's a problem. And we just sit there and watch. But it's a really challenging thing. And I think as the water gets more and more scarce, these cases are going to get more and more difficult. That's been the historical trend. Is change cases 10 years ago weren't as challenging. Now every little piece feels like it's really something that's contested. So, and that makes sense, right? Because we're kind of getting to a point where we really need to figure out, we got to start working together, I think, a lot more, in my opinion. With like initiatives like the Clear River, like so, PRCI initiative would allow some of these senior ditch rights to be used for these other purposes while they're not using them. And it just makes a better use all around of the water that we have, because we're not gonna get any more, we'll probably have less. Yes.
If the municipality buys some land that has CBT water rights, does that still have to go through water court to convert it from agricultural to municipal, or CBT different?
I think CPT is different. And it's why there's a water market that exists in CPT. But I would say that question is not.
Okay.
The specific uses you can use it for, it's not just the same as just any old ditch, right? Anybody else have a specific question?
Are the change cases because there's a change in land use happening with ag land being sold, population growth, is that why this discussion is happening?
Yeah, yes, because, agriculture as a practice is going away and we're developing more land. The issue is that it's not happening one for one, right? So the farm where the water rights is not at that time being developed. And I think it's Utah, don't quote me on this, but Neil looked this up. I think it's Utah that has a requirement that you have to develop the property with the water rights that are historically associated with it. That's not here in Colorado because water rights, your water right is not tied to the land. You can separate it, sell it off. They're very valuable, obviously. And so that's the challenge is we've got these farms that their water rights went away decades ago and we want to develop them. Well, what water do we bring back to them then? Dry up is an issue. So I think that's it. I don't know if I got through like 100.
Yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully if you have additional questions, we can shoot them her way. I know Jennifer is gonna also she's gonna talk specifically about Colorado River water law, but she is obviously an expert as well, so let's get.
Thank you all. This was wonderful. I appreciate coming to hang out with you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, any questions, you can feel free to give them my information. I totally trust you. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I got grabbed your computer because I was like, I know.
So we're gonna roll right into our next speaker here. So happy to have Jennifer Gimbel. She is, I guess, are you not officially retired? Jennifer, are you officially retired?
Oh, no.
Yeah, what is it?
Is it say I'm officially retired?
It says retired.
Okay.
Good to see you.
She's not retired.
I sent it for approval, I swear.
And she is the Senior Water Policy Scholar at the Colorado Water Center with us at CSU. She has a JD from the University of Wyoming, master's degree in mathematics from University of Delaware, and a bachelor's degree from the University of Wyoming. She has taught classes through the Water Center. Very impressively, she served as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science in the Department of the Interior and was Deputy Commissioner for External and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Bureau of Reclamation. She's also Director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board from 2008 to 2013. In August 2022, she was presented as the winner of the Aspinall Award by the Colorado Water Congress. She's also done, I mean, this woman has had an amazing career. She's extremely knowledgeable on Colorado water law, and I'm very happy she's going to be talking to us mostly about Colorado River law, which is her area of expertise, but she's a wealth of information, so I'm happy to have her here.
And I hired her. Yeah.
My legacy are the people I taught.
Yeah. And she's one. So that's great. And
welcome to the class. I'm so thrilled to see you all here and the questions you're asking. So
keep them coming. That shows that you know a little bit and some of you know more. But after that complicated conversation on Colorado water law, we're going to go something simple like the Colorado River. Now, why should we here in northern Colorado be interested in the Colorado River? Yeah. Pardon?
we have our water.
We get a lot of water from the Colorado River. Denver gets half its water from Colorado. Aurora gets a fourth of it. Fort Colvin, a fourth of it. Fort Colvin, really, we all get pieces of Colorado. Really,
And so it's important to know.
So it's
what's going on
important
the
to
river.
know, but
It's also important in that there's a crisis going on.
there's a crisis going on in the river.
And how that's going
And
to
how that's
affect
going
us,
to
or
affect
how that
us,
would have
or how that would have
affected
affected
us,
us,
or
or
will
will
affect
affect us
as
as we
we
come along.
It's really
It's really important.
So
So
if you hear from the state
State
engineer,
engineer,
Corey,
he
you
might,
might,
after me, he might give you this. This is the love snake diagram
that
that
shows
shows
all
all
the rivers that go out
go
of
out
state.
of state.
Colorado
is a headwater state.
We
We
supply
supply
water
to
to probably about 18 states.
states.
We
We
have
have
9
uh,
interstate water compacts
compacts
that
that
rule how we
use
use and
and
how much of the water we can use.
We have two Supreme Courts.
Three-fourths of the water
that
that is lands in the state
goes out of state
for agreements with other states as the Supreme Court decrees. What do you think the largest reservoir of surface water is in Colorado? No. A snowpack. You're right about Blue Mesa. That's manmade storage. But 70% of our water supply comes from the snow.
And
So we have to be cautious of that. And as you can see, we're supplying a big chunk of that downriver. So this is my favorite Remington painting because it just, you look at it and don't see that biscuits for drinking, waters for fighting.
I have to always include that in my presentation.
So we have these rivers leaving Colorado. And at the turn of the century, arguments started happening between the states and Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, about Colorado using too much water and not sending enough to the other states. There were Supreme Court opinions that were coming out saying, looking like they were going to decide arguments between the states based on prior appropriation system. You just heard prior appropriation, first in right, first to use, first in right.
And in fact, they decided in the Laramie River Decree that Wyoming used more than Colorado, and Wyoming got the bulk of the Laramie River.
Well, there was this wonderful, this is my hero, Delphus Carpenter. He, a Greeley farmer, rancher,
Lawyer,
represented the state of Colorado in a lot of these interstate discussions. And especially on the Laramie River.
he could see what the courts do.
It could also see the development that was going on
In California,
in Los Angeles. And the Colorado River was being taken out of the river by the California Aqueduct and moved over to Los Angeles. He's sitting there going, we're screwed unless we figure out a way to share this water, because we're not going to develop that fast. And so this is a book, I think it's on your reader's list. Are you guys still doing reports? And he came up with this idea. The Constitution says 2 states can compact with each other so long as the federal government agrees. And so he convinced, first of all, he started this conversation, by the way, with Nebraska. They were talking about the South Platte. But then he got sidetracked to the Colorado River, which also was having some pretty dynamic conversations. And he convinced all 7 states and the federal government that we can agree on how to use this water
under the compact laws. So under the compact laws, each state's legislature
has to approve that agreement. So a compact is, first of all, an agreement among the states as how much water is going to get each state gets. It's a state law because the legislature has passed a law saying, yes, we approve it. And finally, it goes to Congress. So it's a federal law.
Federal law.
So it's an agreement,
State law,
and a federal.
and a federal law.
That in itself answers the question, why don't we just
Negotiate the compact.
that?
That,
Can you
imagine doing that right now in this day and age?
I just
Like,
can't.
So,
So they got together and
with the federal representative,
and
and they hashed out how to divide up
the
the
river.
river.
Let's talk a little bit just about the basin.
1,400
miles,
miles,
7
7
states,
states, 2 nations, 40 million people, 5.5 million acre feet,
acres,
acres, irrigated land, 4,200 megawatts, $1.5 trillion contributed to.
So this
So
is
this is an economic
workforce
workforce
for the
for the nation.
So these
So these
old guys, all of them are old guys, by the way, got together.
and the group was chaired, there were representatives from each of the states, one representative from each governor. And the federal representative was Herbert Hoover, who at the time was the Secretary of Commerce. They argued for quite some time, trying to figure out how to divide the river. They started with how much each state should get. They could not get an idea. So the last legs of negotiations, they decided that they could cut the basin into what's called the upper basin and the lower basin. With the dividing point and the fair, just right above the Grand Canyon. That they finally came to an agreement on. Upper basin, they thought there was 20 million acre feet of water in the river a year, up to. Average about 18 million acre feet. So they said, we'll be conservative, we'll say it's 15 million acre feet divided. So each basin gets half of that, 7.5 million acre feet for each basin. Then we had the treaty with Mexico in 1944, and we agreed to make sure Mexico got 1.5 million acre feet. Off the top, they get that regardless. Well, okay, now, everybody sold it to their states, sold it to Congress, and here we are. I'm sorry, I said 44, 46. Point out a couple things. You always hear the upper basin states. You'll hear that term. It's Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. Those we call the upper division states because some of the upper basin is in Arizona, and some of the lower basin is in New Mexico. So there's special provisions to apply for that. Compact 1922, signed in 1922, specifically protected pre-contact rights. And you'll hear when we talk about stories, and you'll hear especially the West Slope talk about their pre-compact rights. Most of those rights are agricultural rights. And so those are free and clear of any call or any responsibility that we have to the lower basin. Now, the upper basin was able to come to a better, an easier agreement to deal with in 1948 with the Upper River, Colorado River Compact. And it split the river up, as you can see by those percentages, pretty much based on who was using how much or how much they anticipated. And of course, most of the water was coming from Colorado anyway, so we got the larger chunk. Why is 51.75 and 11.5? I don't know.
But you know how negotiations go. Give and give and give. That's where we ended up. So, but they didn't have a set amount, like 7.5 million acre feet. They divided it up by percentages. So you get a percentage of that water. Also, we have a requirement under the compact. The Colorado River Compact at Lee Ferry says that the upper basin shall not deplete flows below 75 million acre feet over 10 years. Does not say we deliver flows. It says you cannot deplete flows. There's a great article in the Sun about 4 or 5 months ago, where he talks about those words will not deplete and what they mean. Also established a commission with representatives from each state and one from the federal government. So that's what controls us. What happens then is this compact talks about, should we not be meeting our compact requirements at the ferry? It also talks about how the states will split up the difference. If we don't meet that 75 over 10 years, 75 million acre feet over 10 years, there's a whole complex way of looking about how we pay that off. So, the law of the river, usually we say it very relevantly, the law is composed of a lot of different aspects. The basics are, of course, the two compacts, and the Mexican Treaty, along with Arizona and California, which decided how the lower basin would be split up. So when you read in the paper that California has right 4.4 million acre feet, that's because that's what the Supreme Court decided in 1963. You also hear about priorities in the lower basin. I'll come back to that in a minute. But here's what I want to point out to you. Here's most of the water use in the Colorado River Basin is used outside the basin. Outside the basin. You know, we have these huge municipal areas. This is the Colorado Big Thompson Project. This is the Fryer Project in Arkansas. We have Salt Lake City here, Los Angeles, Imperial Valley, Coachella, where most of our vegetables come from. Also, Yuma area, where our vegetables come from. Albuquerque, Rio Grande. So it's always fun when we had Colorado River meetings. We wanted to meet in the basin. So we meet in Santa Fe. We meet in Cheyenne. We meet in Los Angeles. Well, in the basin, but we were drinking water. So once we agreed, part of the reason we got involved with the compact in the first place, and the reason Dell was taken away from Nebraska to come down here, is they were having in this below Lee Ferry, there was a lot of flooding going on. And it was dangerous and people wanted to control the water. They also wanted storage built to help supply these other areas in Arizona and California. Of course, Las Vegas. By the way, Las Vegas got screwed. 350,000 acre feet is all they get of the compact. They, however, have done their best on recycling and conserving water. And there's quite a story to be told, but that's the interesting thing about that. So, Hoover Dam, named for Secretary of Commerce, Hoover, was built in the lower basin. And Hoover Dam is at the very bottom of the Grand Canyon. And that dam then gave that ability, and a couple other, you can see a few other dams here, help control the river. Well, That was nice for all the lower basin states because they could pull all their water out of Lake Mead. The way they get their water is they have a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Secretary of the Interior. For California, 4.4 million feet of water. They order the water, the Bureau of Reclamation sends it down the river. Upper basin states did not so like. We don't have any big reservoir up here that allows us to store water to use. So the upper basin lives and dies on what Mother Nature gives her every year. You'll hear our Commissioner, Becky Mitchell, talk about that. In the years when lower basin were getting full supplies, we were putting vaccine water rights, even pre-compact rights, when water is short. So we live up here by the prior appropriation doctrine. Whatever Mother Nature gives us is what we have. And the lower upper basin is starting to worry that this may affect their obligation with the compact. That 75 million they could feed over 10 years. And so they started lobbying for another reservoir to be built. And actually a series of projects to be built. And this is called the Colorado River Storage Project Act. Kind of very controversial because about this time in the 50s, the conservation movement is changing. The word conservation kind of changed from use it all up to save it for the future. And so you saw environmentalists like Murr and Abby having some issues with these dams that were proposed in the upper basin. The agreements were cut. Congress approved the dams. We have the Canyon Dam, which is right above the Grand Canyon. And is that basic account for the upper basin. As we get the flows, the heavy flows, the flood flows, those come into Lake Powell. And we hold it then so that in dire times, which started happening in 2001, we can make sure that we're meeting our obligations to the lower basin. We also had, do I have that on that? We also had several other reservoirs as part of that act. It's the Flaming Gorge Dam, the Blue Mesa Morrow Point Crystal Dam. This was called the Currituck Unit. It's now called the Ethanol Unit or Senator. And the Navajo Dam. Those dams were built for several purposes. One purpose was to store water to save in case we needed to meet our obligations to the lower basin. We also have used that water under state law. It supplies water for irrigation and other projects in all 4 states. Now, one other comment is one thing to be aware of on the Colorado River are there 30 federally recognized tribes on the Colorado River. In the Colorado River Basin, I should say, that traditionally have used Colorado. The compacts, both compacts, the 1922 and 1946, I put those confused. Upper Colorado River Compact, both say they're not saying anything about the tribes. That's a federal responsibility. We don't affect the tribes. Well, the tribes finally got their act together and said, hold on. We, by law, have a right to water that we use. And so there have been court cases where tribes are trying to figure out how much water they do get. And I see, yeah. So there's about 3.2 million acre feet that have been adjudicated in the river, have been adjudicated to the tribe. There's another 2 million acre feet that they're still, acre feet that they're still working on. The Supreme Court decided that when a tribe has a reserved water right, the right to court business, that it comes out of the state's share. So we have two tribes here in Colorado. We have the Ute and the Southern Ute, and we have an agreement with them. We have a settlement with them. So when they use those water rights, that comes out of Colorado's share of the river. So that's not bad for Colorado. Down to Arizona, Arizona's pretty much all tribes. So they have some really interesting conversation in Arizona. I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna talk about changes to the river. Any questions? Thoughts? You're not sleeping, that's good.
I think one of the videos you read said that, like initial number was on that.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. All right, cool. So, along comes climate change. And, higher temperatures, more extreme events. I love that picture of the hailstone in Colorado. And here's what happens. Less snowpack. Okay. Remember the snowpack is our reservoir. Changes the time the snow comes down the river. We have decrease in spring flows. We have increased water demand for crops and for farms. So that is sucking all that is sucking in the system. And remember, Arizona went what? 100 days at 100 degrees or something like that. I mean, so just think what that says.
I think the wildfires were affecting the earlier too.
Exactly,
You know.
exactly. Because that ground cover is gone. And so the runoff comes like this. So it also the water quality. Those of you that work for some of the municipalities, you have to shut off so you don't get that brown water, black water that comes down after a fire. Picture of Glen Canyon Reservoir and how much it has dropped. And here's the answer to the question. When they had negotiated the compact, they assumed 15 million acre feet a year. Over the last, since 1964, the average has been 9.6 million a year. And yes, they probably could have used the site. When they were negotiating, they had two sets of figures, one from USGS and one from Bureau of Reclamation. Now, these are representatives of their governors. Are they going to assume less water? Are they going to assume more water? Of course, they assumed more water. They were wrong. Had they even assumed less water, they'd have been closer to still wrong. And that reminds me of an adage I tell everyone. Remember, modeling, computer models, always wrong, sometimes useful. So we have this dive in the river. 2000, well, you can see ups and downs. 2001, 2002 hit. Everything below average. We were getting in dire straits. Both reservoirs Mead and Lake Powell were, I told you I was having about that, are getting lower and lower. And so now there's some things that we're concerned about. Well, for one thing, both of those reservoirs generate power. And it's a low-cost power for most of the western United States, mostly the rural areas. So they're not power being developed. The other thing is the money made from that power is used for environmental projects on the Colorado River, like the endangered species projects, and the salinity projects. And in Lake Powell, they weren't sure the dam was not built for this small amount of water. They were worried about structural issues. They still are, by the way. They're concocting some things to take care of that. So we were getting, in 2001, it was looking pretty grim. And that's when you saw a lot of this impacts. 2023 gave us, or gave our negotiators, some breathing room. But here's, so I'm going to give you the,
A couple more minutes.
oh, no.
Speed it up.
All right, so what's the issue on the Colorado River lower basin? 9.6 million acre feet coming in, 10.2 million acre feet going out everywhere this whole time. We're draining both banks. So, Secretary, we had some temporary agreements. We, Secretary declared shortages in the lower basin, still having last year and, or this year and next year. And now we're doing some negotiating to figure out what's gonna happen. Stay tuned. We had an influx of money from Congress. I always say money flows uphill to water. And, or water flows uphill to money, I'm sorry. And so we had some relief from a couple of acts that Congress passed. So people, so here's the bottom line. You're gonna fight with the other states, so we're doing right now. We're gonna figure out how to cross this bridge, so to speak, to get, I think they'll get there. It's just gonna take some time. I'm fully comfortable with our negotiators. There's a few resources for the river, and we'll stop there.
Take a few questions.
So the recent funding from federal government, they said was providing some relief, is that money that's paying farmers in the lower basin to not use?
Farmers in the upper basin.
And,
There's a bit of controversy about that though, because they're paying about 4 times more to farmers in the lower basin. And we're not saving as much up here, because again, a farmer, you know, in the lower basin, they farm year round. Up here, we only have a certain amount of time. So that the economics of it are different.
I understand that the upper basin states and generally not use their full allocation. And the lower basin states.
It's never been there.
Right. Oh, that hasn't been.
The nature doesn't give it to us.
Okay, I thought it was because there just wasn't, the use wasn't developed.
That's part of it too. We haven't.
So is that gonna have any effect on the negotiations, you think?
I think that's one of the conversations that's going on. Negotiations.
I read somewhere that the decline in the bank accounts you mentioned, someone had me at least several thousand in one of those reservoirs. Which one?
It wasn't accidental, it was Blue Mesa, and without one, the federal government released water and nearly drained Mesa. Gave the states, I think, just a couple days warning. Using our federal powers, they control, it's their dam, they control it. And, my dad Bill and recreation in New Mesa was dead. That's pieces of conversations we have right now.
What, newspaper, or like, what's the best way to track this information? Like, all of these, it's just so much more than I kind of technical.
So, yeah, so there's a website that's Colorado River Wiki. That Brad Udall, one of our coworkers, and some folks have put together. So look at Colorado River Wiki. And that's gonna bring up a lot of technical stuff, a lot of the policy stuff.
There's also, Water Education Colorado has freshwater news, and they regularly report, I mean, they report on all Colorado water issues, not just the Colorado River, but they have lots of updates on Colorado River.
And the Sun does a pretty good job, as does
Freshwater
KMC.
news from Water Education Colorado.
From your vantage point and opinion, what would you feel like the top 3 things that need to happen?
Did anyone ever ask you that?
We have to use, we have to we have to stay within the ability, we have to use whatever Mother Nature gives us, not more. We have to make sure we're taking care of the environmental issues. And the tribes have to be dealt with. We've got to figure out how to put the tribes into the system. That's what I'm saying.
What do you think the likelihood on this being put? Or do you think?
Well, that's the nuclear option,
Right, which is really scary.
which is really scary because right now, on the Rio Grande, Texas and New Mexico are fighting and figured out an agreement. And the Supreme Court did not accept the agreement because the federal government didn't like it. That's bad news for Colorado. Yes, every state plans to go to the Supreme Court, but they also avoid it as much as they can. You have 9 justices, none of them right now from the West understand water law at all, or understand our context. So we can go there if we have to. But when you go to the Supreme Court, there's another consideration.
All right, thank you. Okay, so grab your lunches, they're sitting outside there, bring them back in, and we're gonna have our next speakers get started in about 10-ish minutes, so, but we can eat while they talk. So go ahead and grab your lunches.
Just
Yeah. How do you spell that? Thank you.
Hi.
Rich.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm kind of new, so you have to bear with me on the thing, but, see what happens.
What can I provide? We don't have a clicker, which kind of stinks.
No, that's fine.
But I can sit up here and check if you
I
want.
can do it, that's fine.
That's for you.
No, probably little. Mine.
Yeah. Yes, we have this like.
So what group do we have today?
So this is the primary. Whole part, so. Yeah, this is like.